I love what you're saying, and I think it's very spot on. We've seen that approach actually happen. 2008 is the approach that you have just described, where it was not liquidity in the whole market. It was liquidity into the banking sector because so many banks intertwine with one another, as well as the real estate market. Given where we see the economy at today, pure speculation, but what are two or three different sectors of the economy that could be pain points in the near future?
Ooh, well, I'm not a day trader and I'm not a financial advisor. This is
To
going
be
to,
clear, none of this is financial advice. Everyone
yeah.
needs to do their own due diligence.
So I think, so you're in this difficult situation because traditionally when you go into a recession, the old standbys are go to cash, go to bonds, and defensives, basically to try to rate it out. So if you're trying to play like the cycle and you're just like risk off, like that would be the way to go. I don't know if that's the situation that we're going to see right now because you have this global dynamic where people are so manic, basically, right? And I think that is what's shocking to me is just how quickly you've seen the narrative shift from inflation to recession, right? And so I think people think right now we're in like that pivot from inflation to recession, and then mentally they're recalibrating towards what a traditional recession is. But I think people just don't have a mental model for like an inflationary depression, right? Where essentially inflation for lots of reasons, whether it's demographics, because old people, have high medical costs and COVID is straining even more medical costs, which basically burdens our public systems. We have to spend more money. We have to rearm in a geopolitical conflict. We have to, in accordance with the sort of G7 communiques, invest to outcompete China in the Belt and Road Initiative. Western governments made huge amounts of commitments to re-green their economies, despite the manifest Russian dependency that they have in Europe on oil and gas. So all these things are be structurally inflationary. Like they just have to invest and create more credit basically to accomplish those strategic objectives. But really, they're running out of hard resources to do this, right? And so when you have high demand and not enough resources, you get high prices. But you have geopolitical situations creating uncertainty and volatility. When there's high volatility, people pull back their credit. And so I think this sort of ties both points. I think what you're going to see is private credit issuance, basically private credit markets stop to marginally function very well. And so all the assets and equities that are tied to this private money creation basically become really vulnerable. And so that's why I see like venture capital and all these sorts of more growthy parts of the sector become more vulnerable because fundamentally they're based on confidence in a growing global system, growing economy, that we can price these things at high valuations, assuming, exponential growth, et cetera. Meanwhile, the marginal production of new credit is going to come from, the state sector, essentially state-led finance. And in the East, it'll be explicitly state-directed. In the West, it'll be basically like strong incentives and penalties if you don't finance what we want you to finance. And so I think if you're trying to invest for like that time horizon, this is the sad part of what you're in right now, right? If you're really trying to make money, basically the central planning is what is gonna drive credit issuance and drive growth. And until those structures fail, that's where the marginal credit creation is going to go to. And I think what you're seeing right now, so that's where I would invest. Basically things like, for example, like in the United States, I think is relatively well positioned, but certain sectors of the economy are going to benefit from geopolitical tension, right? We're going to have to be reversing some of the flows of globalization that we've seen in the past 20 years. So a lot of investment is going to have to come to North America, Mexico, some parts of South America, maybe some parts of South Asia to try to relocate some of our critical supply chains. We're going to need to sort of dramatically reinvest in our domestic economy to try to limit our dependency on some of those critical overseas production, namely in China. And we're also going to be trying to fight a new Cold War with China and potentially a indefinite proxy war in Europe with Russia. And that's just going to be expensive and lead to lots of money going to sort of the defense industrial sector. And so if you're sort of being cynical and you just want to play the flows, that's where you would go. Whether that's good is another story. So yeah, that's where I would be. But I don't know. I'm also just like thinking about things in the long term. So I think in general, this is extremely volatile situation. So trying to predict what's going to happen to a certain market next 6, 12, 18 months is hopeless. I'm trying to think about where we are by the end of the decade in like the 2030 time frame. And that's where you make these long-term bets. That's why I think Bitcoin has the most interesting kind of relevance, given all the dynamics that we've played out. So that's where, if I'm thinking to the end of the decade, I think that's a good place to be too.